Thanks, everybody. Really happy to be here. So I'm going to talk a bit more personally about my journey and why I've come all the way that I've come and how these issues have transformed around me, and also why they're important. So would anybody here, raise your hand, if you think that it's important for society or for your company, we're talking about results, to have diversity. Yeah, it's pretty representative. When you ask the question today, I would say that in companies, like, there are 0 people who don't raise their hand, and maybe there are some that don't believe it, but they raise their hand because it would look bad if they didn't. So everybody pretty much does. So we live in a world where we accept that diversity is actually important for our results. But if I asked another question, do you actually know why that is? Does anybody know why? Okay, a few people. Usually when I go to companies, 0 people know. So we have an enlightened audience. But very few people understand the reasons why. And the why impacts the how. So what I realized in my 10 years of working on this subject is that 10 years ago, we had the same issues, only we had a lot less t-shirts about it. You could not find a t-shirt. So today you find many t-shirts. It's exactly that. You know, a lot of people are enlightened about the subject. A lot of people think that it's important. But a lot of people still, if you ask them why that is, they do not understand. And so I think part of the change will come also through raising awareness and talking person to person about why these issues are important. For example, you know, people don't know things like, why is it important? Why would somebody have quotas? Why is it important? Why do we have bias when we recruit? Well, you know, I interviewed a VC in New York, and he told me, well, of course, when I see a man in front of me who went to Stanford and is 20 years old, I see myself. So I know that he's going to be great. And I see that I am investing on what is sure. When I see something that I don't know what it's in front of me. It could be better or it could be worse. But I simply don't know. And the reason is that human beings are averse to risk. So actually, diversity goes against what we're wired as human beings. You have to go beyond what you believe to do the right and the good thing for your company and for yourself. So understanding things like this makes us, well, maybe feel a little less shameful about the biases that we all have. Something else, for example, that I work on, which is a very difficult topic, is sexual harassment. And usually sexual harassment is like compliance, bad, punishment. And, well, I don't think it's that it should be seen that way. For example, when I interviewed somebody who works in mines in South Africa on a project, I asked, you know, why is there sexual harassment? And sexual harassment exists, he said, because, for example, in South Africa, women could not go down in mines until 1996. Wow, that's pretty recent. Which means that there were no women until very recently. It was only men. Doesn't that reflect kind of what the workplace is like today? And so when women started going down in the mines, the men did not know how to relate with them. They did not know how it was to have women colleagues next to them. They did not know how it was to have a woman telling you what to do. And so they could not relate to them. And so what did they do? Well, once again, we get back to human nature. They said they tried subconsciously to push them out. So sexual harassment came as a behavior of not knowing how to relate to women in that particular workplace. And guess what? Through their behavior, they actually kicked them out. No woman wanted to go down there anymore. So all of these things show that, I think, sort of the vulnerability of us as human beings and why these things exist, why we see all of these inequalities and injustices in our society. And we have to think that we are in the workplace, since very recently in human history. For thousands of years, we had 0 rights. So we cannot expect these things to change overnight. And that's why we need to do proactive measures and things that will make us advance, because history simply will not change that alone. And I think that whenever we talk about human behavior, while the human behavior is not positive, because it is human behavior, we can change it. So there's a very positive message around that and about what what every one of us can do. So that's my motto as an activist, and what I try to push for is not the big change. I was at the Women's Forum in Toronto speaking with a panel. This is not after something I said, but something somebody else said. But a woman got up and she said, I have no idea what to do. I'm feeling so overwhelmed by all this. You're talking about, all these management issues that have to change, all of these policies that need to change, all of these big things that need to change. And where does that leave me? What do I do? And she was angry, rightfully so. And she was pissed off, and she said, well, okay, like all of this has to change, and what do I do in the meantime? Do I just wait? And, my message as an activist is no. If we talked about, all the little stories that I told you before, it can be each one of us making a change in the life that we each have. For example, it's how you behave with your children. It's how, you choose to educate your daughters. It's how you decide to make them be exposed to STEM so that it's an option for them later. It's about how you look at your colleagues. You work with your colleagues. And if you're a woman, it's also about how you negotiate your salary for yourself, but also for all women. So each one of us can, in their own lives, make the difference that I think is going to change the world. There is no need for any bigger difference to be made immediately, because so much can change. Think about if just everybody in this room went home and did something. And in value with my line of inspiring change from the ground, which is something that is very aligned with what I've done through Led by Her. I've recently launched a podcast called The Other Half. And why did I launch this? Because, well, I've been around for 10 years. That's a long time on the subject. So I started when I'm 23. I'm not that old. But I basically go to all the conferences and every event around women, Women's Day, everything, women's networks, everything around the world. And I always see the same people. Funny. And I know them, and they become my best friends, because I see them more than my family. But, the thing is that if we only talk amongst each other, where is the world going to go, we're the people we're talking to in rooms that we're speaking in are already the people who are convinced. So I think we need to enlarge the subject. And so I chose to interview male CEOs and leaders around the world and have them talk about gender equality in their own life and in their personal life and professional life, and what they're doing in order to give ideas so that they can inspire other men to take action in their own lives. And you may go on and listen to it. And the first episode that I did was with a CEO named Amir Orad. And this may be a coincidence, or I might be just a very good talent spotter, but his company just became a unicorn in January and has a $1 billion valuation. And he talked about the importance of diversity in the success of his company, but also about why it was a value in his own life. And I think that the moment that stuck with me most, and I've done several interviews, so I see some trends. The moment that stuck with me the most was, when I asked Amir about his own mother. Mostly because, big-time CEOs don't get asked that kind of question. And he said, actually, what? Maybe I am a believer in diversity because my mother was a chief executive. And so that's the model that I always saw in my own life. And so for me, it was natural that woman and leader went together. Exactly what's not natural in our society today. So that really touched me. And what also touched me is the vulnerability and authenticity with which these men have spoken, because authenticity and vulnerability is needed to open the conversation, but authenticity and vulnerability are also qualities that we only associate with women. So it's very interesting to see men go into that space. And when Amir talked about this, coincidentally, it's quite a trend in the other leaders that I've interviewed, is sort of the experience with their mother. And I think that that's the most valuable thing to change society. I can tell you that gender equality is good for us, good for society. I can tell you that 1,000,000 times. I can write it on this big board, but you wouldn't believe me. Or you wouldn't integrate it. It would speak to your mind, but it wouldn't speak to your heart. So I think what really changes people is experience, is seeing things, is going through things. And it's that way that people are going to integrate and understand. And by integrating and understanding, we're going to raise awareness, and we're going to make everybody become a more responsible human being, because with awareness also comes responsibility. And with responsibility comes action. So I leave each one of you with that message tonight. Thank you.